Welcome to the TheEatingCast. I am Chris.
And I'm Vincent, and today we are joined by a good friend, Dee. For anonymous reasons, we won't be disclosing who he is.
Privacy reasons, not anonymous reasons.
Oh, my bad. For privacy reasons, yeah, so we won't disclose who he is, but welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So Dee, I know it's like, just kind of like scheduling and everything like that. It's like, you're a very busy man, obviously. So we are very thankful and we're very appreciative of kind of like you coming on. And for our viewers, unfortunately, there will be no video recording of this episode due to just privacy reasons, and as well as kind of our listeners. What we are eating today, we got some lovely sushi from the one and only Lawrence Fish Market. If you have not checked out Lawrence Fish Market, it's actually on Lawrence next to Pulaski. It's a very delicious, quick sushi stop, cheap and affordable, and they're pretty good. The quality is pretty good. I've been going there for many years and they have never disappointed.
They've been there for a very long time, right? Yeah. I think also kind of off topic, but Lawrence used to be the OG Seoul Drive, right? Korean
Seoul
town.
Drive? Yeah.
Yeah. So
used to be Koreatown, yeah.
That would be another topic for another day, but yeah.
All right. So, and as well, as always, we always have our lovely Starbucks. Unfortunately, I'm feeling sick today, so I just got some tea.
Yeah.
No coffee for me, guys.
We got the original black coffee, but yes, we need that now.
And I'm assuming this is a black coffee as well.
That's all black coffee, yeah. All right, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, awesome. Perfect. All right, so Dee, if you want, you can go ahead and dig in, but before that, like if you want to talk a little bit about yourself, go ahead and give us like a rundown, who you are, what do you, if you want, talk about what you do, you can talk about that, where your passions lie, and kind of like where you're kind of like headed in life.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in eastern China, 2 hours away from Shanghai, if you take the bullet train. And I migrated to this country 7 years ago to pursue my master's degree in journalism. And I went to A school. I'll just put it that way. I went to A school in Boston, studying multimedia journalism there, and I graduated in 2014. And I went on to pursue a full-time journalism career. It was difficult at that time. It was not easy. There were only a handful of international students. And at that time, and I think it's still the situation now, that journalism is not a very sought after major that people, like students from other countries, will actively pursue. A lot of them would choose accounting, business or engineer, something that's not super linguistically charged, because that's our weak spot.
Clearly not for you. Definitely not for you.
And I just I study English translation back in China for my undergrad, and I just love English language in general, and I want to pursue something that I can immerse myself in this linguistic environment. So I picked journalism, and I absolutely enjoy Boston as a city, and there's an abundance of opportunities there for whoever wants to practice journalism to either report on local politics, arts, entertainment, or business, and I think it's a great place to start. So I got a full-time job starting as a business reporter in Chicago in late 2015, and so that's when I moved here, like after living in Boston for 3 years. And now I've been a business and financial journalist for 4 years now, so I've been in this country for 7 years.
Did you come to Chicago by yourself? Did you know anyone in Chicago?
So I came here with my ex. Yeah.
Okay.
And we came here with no job leads at all. I was very anxious at that time for the entire 2 months. And I was building up my resume on LinkedIn, and I was freelancing at the same time, looking for local newspapers or whoever that wants to take me to cover small story. I honestly didn't know what I want to do, but all I know is I want to do journalism. I don't mind an entry-level, low-paying job at that time. I just want to pursue my career, my dream. It was difficult, to be honest. It was very difficult. In addition to the fact that English is not my first language, A lot of international journalism students choose to either become a marketing person later on, or do multimedia in their career because it's more technical and it involves less in language. But I always think that, we as immigrants, we need voice. So journalism is a great platform to channel that. So that's why I decided to cover local politics. I cover like homeless community back in Boston, immigration related stories, but they're hyper local. So lots of interviews with city councilors, mayors, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if that's something I want to pursue for a very long time, like down the road. So when I moved to Chicago, during that anxious 2 months, my former editor found me on LinkedIn and said, "Do you want to cover the food industry?"
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was very excited. And for a very fundamental reason, first of all, it's a full-time journalism job, which I thought I would never get it. And that took me almost a year because I was freelancing in Boston and moved to Chicago. That was like a year. And I was just doing a part-time job. And what else did I do? I was doing some recruitment at Harvard for their Kennedy School. And I was freelancing at the same time for various local newspapers. I did freelance for another local newspaper when I first moved to Chicago, but that didn't last for very long because within 2 months I finally got that job at that British publishing company. But they're actually global and they have offices everywhere across the world.
So it was like a perfect fit for you.
It was a perfect fit. But I didn't know at that time if it was a right fit. Like I didn't know if it was a right choice for me to do that because I always wanted
the full time. Are you talking about the right choice to go for full time?
Yeah, so for full time business reporting on the food industry.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it was something that I want to do for the rest of my life. Because I don't know whether covering food will give immigrants a voice to contribute to our community. I didn't know because it was business publication. And it turned out I was wrong because there's so many immigrants who are entrepreneurs. And they want to, channel their story into creating something that's deeply personal. Yeah. So, it could be someone's mom who's migrated from South Korea and they want to create a seaweed snack, seaweed chips, which was not popular in the U.S. before. But now, increasingly, you see seaweed as a very popular snack. So things like that, it can get very personal. So I finally find the meaning in it. And I was very grateful for the fact that my editor found me and finally helped me to land a full-time job in that wonderful organization. So I worked there for 3 years until I feel like I could be an expertise in certain food categories.
And are you? Would you say?
Well, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Not for any bragging reason, but I would say I was pretty knowledgeable about especially the confectionery and the snacks industry. And I was invited on to NPR Marketplace to talk about the confectionery trend. I had several consulting sessions with big consumer packaged food companies like South Korea's Lotte, as well as I was approached by Mondelez for consulting on the chocolate industry. So it was actually very rewarding until Forbes find me about a year ago, and they're like, "We really appreciate your insights and knowledge, and do you want to jump on board and become a contributor?" And I said yes.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is wild.
See, that's what I really like about that story. What kind of rang a bell with me is that most times, we talked about this in previous episodes, but a lot of college grads, the first thing they think about when they come out is like, okay, it's gonna be so easy. Everything's gonna be set in stone, right? We're gonna have a full-time job, a career right off the bat. But what they don't understand is, that struggle of not having any leads or just keep grinding, looking for interviews and networking, but they don't, they think it's going to be handed to them. But this story here is you create that path for yourself, and then opportunities will come find you. And I really like that. So I mean, it must have been really difficult, like you said, especially if you didn't know anyone. You're an international student too.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I completely agree. Unfortunately, journalism, like many other industries, are it can get very privileged. If you're privileged, if you're connected, if you're from certain backgrounds, it shows. Their privilege shows at the very beginning when you're at school. Who get the job, who get to become an anchor, who get to be on TV, certain looks, right? If you're a native speaker, you're more likely to land a writing job than international students for obvious reasons. People, because publishing industry is also a business, they want their business to be successful. So if I'm a hiring manager, like, why would I want to hire someone who don't even speak our language well to be that writer? You say, like,
but I feel like like in that case though, it's very, that's unfortunate, right? Because like a lot of times, right, like when people come here, right, and to study, right, from like international students come over here to study, granted there's a language barrier, but in like for instance, like your case where how you pursued journalism, right? You were you said a English translator in during your undergrad in China. So like, I feel like that's already a step up, just because like your understanding of the English language, no offense to like anyone listening to this, but like it's like a lot higher than majority of the population, and that should already set you up to be more than like acceptable to kind of like go into that kind of like a position, right? Because like your knowledge and kind of like your linguistics is a lot higher than the average person, so it would technically put you at a higher level.
Actually, I'm really glad that you brought that up point, because I will completely be honest with you. I have my own privileges too, and I do want to acknowledge that. I do have a platform where I can advance if I try. But for many other people, that opportunity doesn't even exist at the very beginning.
What would you say your privileges are?
I would say that I grew up in the big city in China, where my parents have the resources to send me to an English school when I was 7, even though it was just a Saturday school, and we studied English on the side.
That's so funny. So like over here, our parents sent us to a Chinese school.
It's very similar, right?
It's really interesting that that's like that over
We're
here.
learning from each other.
Yeah,
for sure. Parents want their kids to be successful, want their kids to be, bilingual at least. English is obviously a very important language, and back in China, we study as like mandatory subject, and then we have to pass it in order to go to college. But whether you will learn it well, that the ability really varies, depends on a person. So I would say one of the privileges is that my parents have the resources to send me to English school when I was 7. And I went to a state university in China. If you know the demographics, very few people are actually from within the city. Most of the students are from elsewhere within my province.
So like the rural, would you say the rural
So
areas?
it can be rural areas, it could be counties or smaller cities. And I encounter many of them who can do English exams, like grammar exams, very well, but they don't speak English very well. So that's the problem with their learning process. Most of the times in smaller cities, they don't have the right resources, or they don't have enough English speakers from English-speaking countries to sort of talk to them directly. So they have less exposure to that. A lot of things, most of the time, like the things that they say, things that they write, really don't make any sense. So I would say I'm very privileged to have parents who are able to send me, even like save up enough money to send me to a school in the US, and also during my freelance time they're able to pay rent. So freelance, it sounds very like, it sounds stressful to some people.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've been freelance for years, but we also need to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And where is that capital? Where is that resource comes from? Usually is that they do have a very privileged background. I do acknowledge that. And I absolutely appreciate my parents' support. That's a very important part of it.
Yeah.
I don't think I will be able to make it without them.
Did they ever try to push you to be like a doctor or anything like that? Like the traditional Asian stereotype career?
That's a very interesting point because
I don't think they had that.
that comes to the difference between Asian Americans and Chinese nationals.
Yeah. I was recently just watching a stand-up from Ronnie Chang, and he was, you know who that is? By any chance?
Yep.
So he was saying how that's like the first ticket for immigrant families to come to America. That's like their thing is to have their kids become a doctor, not for the reasons to help people. That's like the last thing on their list. That's like a negative byproduct of helping people. And so he was saying that the thing is, it's just bragging rights, prestige, right, and then money. Because then that's like, he was saying that that's the moment where your first generation is, in one generation, is flipped for where, you know, they start to make more money in America. So yeah, I think that is, if you come to America, that is an Asian American thing for sure.
Right.
Yeah, now that you brought that up.
And there's also, that's also an era-related things. Back in the days when China was not doing very well, or, you know, at least not economically well, people moved here to make money.
Yeah.
Right. 30 years ago, Chinese immigrants, especially from the South, will come here to do the most basic job. They work at restaurants, you know, they wash dishes at restaurants. They will do whatever they can because I think that the ratio between US dollars and Chinese currency, RMB, was at that time was like 1 versus 11 or even 12 or something.
Wow.
It was pretty, yeah. So
That's a really big discrepancy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So if you do a basic job and to convert that currency back to RMB and send the money back to China, that's a lot of money. And when China started getting really powerful over the past 20 years, that ratio is obviously narrowing down until obviously recently there's trade war going on. So that helps like devalue the currency again a little bit. But the overall trend, what I'm saying over the past 20 years, is China's absolutely skyrocketing. And the advantage is when you have more, and I think it happens to everyone, when you have more, you know, economic advantage, it not only gives you more room to spend, but it gives you more room to explore other things. We oftentimes find people in liberal arts or people who wants to pursue a singing career or, you know, wants to be an artist, and they need to have that economic foundation to be at a high level already. It really comes down to, you know, the idea between being conservative and being liberal. Like being liberal, you do have that conservative financial solid background. And it's hard when you don't have that background and you still want to be, you know, you want to do whatever you want to pursue your dream. That's great. But sometimes it's just not possible when you don't have that.
Or it's really hard.
It is really hard. Yeah. Exactly.
Because like there was actually a I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Casey Neistat.
I'm not.
Yeah, so he's a YouTuber. He actually released a video a little while ago that I watched in regards to kind of like wealth versus happiness, right? I think the story, it was about a super wealthy or a well-off businessman in New York. And pretty much he was talking about how his life is very sad, is very like underfulfilling. He's not happy, and he was talking about how like, you know, money can't solve, or money cannot lead to happiness and stuff like that, right? While like Casey actually brought up a very good point, right? It's like when you're in the elite, right, and you have that money, you don't really need to think about where am I going to eat today? Will I have enough food for my family? Do I have enough money for rent this month? You know, and if I'm going to keep my job, right? You're not necessarily thinking of that, right? When you're like in that kind of like level. So like he raised a point where it's like money can solve these basic necessities and needs, right? And then from there, the elite and the lower income families do have a similarity in terms of like needing to achieve happiness, success, fulfillment, and just personal well-being, right? That's just across the board. And he was talking about how, like, you know, when you're an elite and you don't have to deal with the struggle and everything like that, you're able to kind of like more easily pursue your passions. But at the same time, while pursuing your passions, you might be like blindsided by all these other things that you might want to do, which leads to unfulfillment. While as a individual that is from a lower income, and when they do have that money to now cover for their, you know, rent, food, and family costs, right? They don't have to worry about, you know, starving or struggling to find food the next day. They can now better like hone in on actual like what they want to do, you know, how to be creative, how to better maximize, you know, their life potential, you know, like how to better find satisfaction within life, because they've been in that kind of environment where
they've been struggling.
Yeah, they've been struggling,
yeah.
Right? And now they're not, and they have better access to kind of like, or a better ability to reach that happiness.
But then what's to say, like, just to be devil's advocate, let's say someone started at that low level, struggled up there, and then they're making all this money, and then they still say like, oh, I'm unfulfilled, I'm not satisfied. But so then
yeah, I mean, like, I guess that's a bad point, but like I mean my point was pretty bad, but in the idea of like, you know, for individuals that's constantly struggling day to day by living paycheck to paycheck, they don't have time to focus on, you know, personal happiness, because they have to focus on the family,
the basic needs.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I feel like they're given the ability to focus on it, they're more willing and more able to kind of like hone in on something specific and find satisfaction out of that.
Yeah. What's that like in China, that social economic construct? What is that like over there?
It's more segregated, I would say. Not in terms of, you know, racial backgrounds, because the country, although we do have, you know, 56 ethnicities, but compared to the U.S., our diversity is not even close to that scale. So I would say it's more depends on like geographical locations. People from the first tier cities. And when I say first tier, that's when I realized that's not a very familiar concept to most American audiences. First tiers are most cities on the East Coast, like Beijing, like Shanghai, like Guangzhou. These are first tier cities. And the capital city of provinces, they're second tier. And then it comes to third tier cities, right?
So there's 3 total.
There are 3 tiered cities, and now it comes down to counties and villages.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
So if you happen to live in a first tier city, you have better access to healthcare. You have better access to education. So the wealth is more likely to be distributed there. And people from second and third tier cities would love to move there, and they would do whatever they can, right? And although it can be difficult, so I would say it's more like depends on the geographical locations. And it doesn't necessarily mean people from second tier cities don't have as much money as people from first tier.
Right.
I mean, everywhere has capital.
Right. I was going to say, like, if someone said, oh, I'm from Beijing, is that equivalent to someone saying, oh, I'm from Beverly Hills here in America?
Not necessarily. But if you're from Beijing, you somehow, like, people think very highly of you, maybe. And then it will come down to, you know, which neighborhood you live. You're from Chaoyang district, that's a fantastic neighborhood. If you're from outside of Beijing, that's a different story, right? It still depends.
That's so wild.
Yeah, or if you're migrant workers from somewhere else, from Hebei province, and you migrated to Beijing to pursue a restaurant waiter's job, and that's also a different story. So it really comes down to individual, I would say, but the general sense is that if you're native from Shenzhen, if you're native to Shanghai, we would assume that, you know, you obviously the apartments that you own values a lot more compared to the rest of the country. You have more resources. We also have this system in China called hukou, the residency. It's kind of like U.S. green card almost, except that it's a lot more difficult to get.
What's the process like for that?
So you have to move to a city. If it is a second tier city, it's pretty easy. You get a job there, right? And then you wait for a few years and to change your hukou from your original hometown to that city. It takes a lot longer if you're in big cities in Beijing and Shanghai. It could take over 20 years.
Wow. And this is for like an American trying to be Chinese citizen? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's for Chinese from elsewhere to move to that city.
Oh, what the hell?
Yeah.
It's really, it sucks.
Damn.
Yeah.
It's kind of like...
it's like you can't come to Chicago until you work here for at least 3 years.
No,
exactly.
kind of like that, but like it really sucks because like it kind of... I hate to like kind of relate this to like, you know, the Hunger Games or anything like that, right? But like I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
So the Hunger Games is it's pretty much a book, also a movie. It's pretty much about like an individual and like pretty much the society they live in, right? I believe it was 12 tiers.
Districts?
12 districts.
Something like that.
Right. And each district, right, going up to number 1, right, is in a sense a better, quote unquote, better city, right? It's like you're leveling up, right? If you're able to move up from like District 12 to District 1. They each have their own kind of like how you're talking about, like it's a lot easier to get access to healthcare and stuff like that in like a tier 1 city. So it'd be like similar like that, right? In like in the sense where it's like the first, second, maybe third, or even fourth district, right, were really good at, or really had really good healthcare, right? And then as you go down, the access to healthcare and the cost for healthcare probably shoot up and increase a lot. So it's kind of like, yeah, that just came into my mind. And it's like just an analogy. It's crazy.
It is really sad, especially when it comes to. I want to bring up the education aspect of it. Back in China, we have this milestone that everybody sort of has to pass called Gaokao.
Yeah.
College entrance exam. And it's not even close to SAT here in the US because you can take multiple times throughout the year.
So this is just one time then?
Which is one time in June.
Oh, wow.
And there are millions of people who take it every year upon graduation from high school. They're literally competing for a very limited amount of resources. And especially during recently, I mean, I haven't gone back for several years, but my general sense, just through talking to my family, is that the country wants to increase the amount of people with special skills. So they're actually trying to actively recruit more students to go to vocational schools rather than a 4-year university.
I see.
So that makes going to a regular university even more difficult. We grew up in a highly competitive environment, I would say, coming from not central China, but second tier city.
Yeah.
It's a highly competitive environment. We have 10 million people in my city alone.
That's Chicago, man.
Within
About 10
the city.
million. Oh my God.
In our city, it's a second tier city.
God damn.
Beijing and Shanghai is like 22 million.
That's double Chicago, man. Almost triple, I think.
And my point is,
That's huge.
my point is, I thought I did decently well in Gaokao. And I went to like a state university. So it's not, so even universities are ranked.
I mean, it's the same as over here, though. It's like you have
an Ivy League school and you have state universities, right?
Yeah, and then you have your community colleges,
Exactly.
which are like just local schools. Yeah.
Right, but except that there are a lot more schools that you can go to.
Yeah, definitely.
We do not.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought I did decently well until I saw my ranking in an entire Anhui province. Actually, I was on the top, but I did not know that. So that makes me even more sad because I realize how few people can eventually go to a college, including the worst one, the worst 4-year college. And
So
that's
like, when you say the top, were you like in the top half or like just top in general?
top 20%.
Oh, wow.
And I went to a state university.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so do the math. That was 2008.
And that you said roughly like 10 million people, correct?
That was in one city. The entire Anhui province has a lot more.
God.
It's a highly competitive environment. So I have this friend I went to middle school with, but she's really good. She went to a top-notch high school later. And I don't think she did as well as I did in Gaokao. But her family, her mom, who's a doctor, got a residency somehow because she landed a job in Shanghai. So her entire family moved to Shanghai. So she used our score based on our provincial standards and applied in Shanghai. She got into a way better school than I did.
That's crazy.
Exactly.
What?
So it's a really unfair system. It's
I feel like
unfair
you should get retested if you're going to a different province or
Well,
a different.
That's just how unfair the society is. It's not super transparent society. There are lots of loopholes that we just never question because we're so indulged in everyday study, right? And I'm very glad. That's one of the greatest things I appreciate when I came to the U.S. is that people actually talk about social justice here.
Yeah.
And we talk about so much about social justice,
we do.
movement, protest, this and that, what's considered offensive, and news articles, and people make that into movies. They act like everyone is an advocate for that.
Yeah.
We don't have those conversations in China
Because if you did, they'd probably cut you down, right? Like, right?
It's something that we think the scale, especially when it comes to population, is just way too large. And there's no way for us to get a consensus. We think that's hopeless. We think it's just impossible to get a consensus on something if we want to make a difference.
So if that's the case, like, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up though. It's like, so how does that stand right with like Hong Kong then?
That's a great point. If you look at mainlanders, there's a considerable amount of mainlanders who actually support pro-democracy protest.
Really?
They don't speak up. Part of the reason is they think they will get censored. And very sad reason, I would say, it comes down to the point that I brought up earlier, is they think they're hopeless. They feel hopeless about this movement.
So they're like, in a sense, they feel like their voice or their opinion would not matter.
Yeah, they can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
But when you really think about it,
because we've been through...
majority of people are thinking it, but they're hesitant because like, oh, the majority won't probably think the same way.
Can you imagine that uprising in China? Like, that's millions and millions of people.
Because we've been through June 4th.
Yeah.
30 years ago.
Is that Tiananmen?
Tiananmen Square?
Yeah, Tiananmen Square.
And what was the result? It came to no avail.
Yeah.
The party is still well alive. The government is getting stronger, more controlling each year.
Yeah.
And the benefit, on the plus side, the country is doing economically well.
Yeah.
But again, money doesn't necessarily associate with democracy. So the downside is the richer that they get, the less likely that they think these social movements will actually make any waves.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's such a shame, though. Oh my God.
What? So then, if you don't mind me asking, what do your parents think about the Hong Kong protests?
They tend not to talk about it because we communicate with each other on WeChat.
Yeah.
And every time, even when we do webcam, and my dad will shush me and say, we're probably monitored by the government, so we can talk about everything, but just don't bring it up on WeChat.
Right.
And that's the only mean through which we communicate. But the general sense, since my parents live in that country their entire life, they've never been abroad. before.
Yeah.
They don't speak English. They don't speak a word of English, actually. So
What dialect do they speak?
they speak Mandarin.
Mandarin. Okay.
And they're Chinese nationalists
Okay.
because that's how they were raised.
Right.
That's how they were brought up. So that's all I know. So if we have different political point of views, for me, it's very natural for me to understand that because I'm not, well, I guess I'm Chinese American now, but I'm a naturalized citizen.
Yeah.
I was raised in China, so I know where that mentality comes from. So I'm not surprised that they hold on to that value so much. It's kind of like in the US, you know, when you look at old white men, you know, who hold on to their power for a long time. They just don't want to give up, and people are feeling nostalgic. You know, they want the old USA come back, and the younger generation just think, nope, that's impossible. You're feeling nostalgic, but we have tons of issues, racial tensions, you know, injustice.
Make America great again.
Exactly, and the younger generation is no, we never experienced that, and we don't want that era to come back.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in our generation in China. My parents experienced Cultural Revolution. My dad was born in 1959, which is the beginning of 3-year natural disaster. And even at that time, people were encouraged by Mao to start their commune and then pulling all their resources together and build something great, which was nonsense at that time. Right? They have propaganda about how a pig can be shared by the entire village for the entire week. Right?
If it's a village of two, maybe, yeah.
I am the village.
So that movement was called Great Leap Forward.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s. So my parents experienced that. And remember, our grandparents, a lot of our grandparents was actually born before People's Republic was established. So they still have that early memories. Like my grandfather who passed 3 years ago, he still has that early memories of what Republic was like growing up.
Yeah.
Although very early stage, like he was a kid.
Yeah.
But our parents who were born in the late 50s or early 60s, they grew up, like, their whole life was spent in this very hush environment, right? So do you expect them to be brave and to do something?
No, because, like, I would actually, now that you mention it, I do see it now. Because I agree with you. And it's also because, like, there was this whole mentality where it's like, if I'm not mistaken, I could be completely wrong on this, but, like, back then in the day, like, during that time, there was this big thing about, like, if your friend or if your neighbor is saying something bad about Big Brother, it's like, you need to let us know, right? And then you'd be rewarded properly.
Exactly. People report on each other.
My grandpa in Vietnam, when he was selling, like, VHS, someone reported him saying that he was sending signals to America. And then the Viet Cong, like, snagged him.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right?
It's really crazy.
Basically, your leader is the God.
Yeah.
And you listen to whatever that they tell you, right?
I mean,
everyone's looking out for themselves, too.
That, too. But even if you look at it now, right, like, you have a lot of these, like, you know, the grandpas, right, or, like, the uncles, right, that are kind of, like, at that age, that were born in that time. They just walk around, you know, minding their own business, you know, but you can see from the corner of your eye, they're clearly observing you if you're, like, an outsider.
Yeah.
They're just watching you, seeing if you're, like, you know, trying to do harm to China or anything like that. And then, like, it's really sad that that's still happening. Like, they were brainwashed at such a young age that, you know, they get rewarded by Big Brother. That is, like, man.
It's my favorites.
Yeah.
So this year is also the 30th anniversary of June 4th.
Yeah.
Tiananmen Square movement. And I remember I shared pictures of tanks to my family WeChat group.
Yeah.
I just did
God.
because, you know, it was big.
Yeah.
And I want them to know, and I believe they do know about it. And one of my aunts sat in the group. She said, if you keep doing that, you will get censored and your account will be suspended. So I'm telling you, for your sake, for your own good. And I disagreed with them. I said, are you like trying to intimidate me?
Yeah.
Just because they're going to censor me? Do you think that will stop me from doing it? And my mom saw those pictures too. And she's like, well, this year is also the 70th anniversary of People's Republic of China. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just several historical events occurred at the same time. And my mom said, why do you share pictures of tanks? And then a minute later, those pictures were deleted. It disappeared.
Big brother.
She said, well, I saw it for a second and then it disappeared. That's what she said.
Damn.
But I mean, that's probably because like WeChat is it's ran by the government though, right?
It's monitored by the government.
Oh, monitored. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the corporations are very like comply, obviously.
Yeah.
To the government, and we have our censorship issues here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Your data is sort of controlled, by big corporations. We saw like data breach by Facebook, this and that. But in China, it's more government controlled. Mm-hmm. So WeChat is ubiquitous, basically. Especially in mainland, people use it not just as a communication tool; they use it to pay their electricity bills.
Yeah.
They use it to pay, restaurant bills when they
like
dining.
Yeah. Wait, what province in China is doing the Muslim pretty much genocide?
Yeah. So that's in Xinjiang.
Mm.
Xinjiang is the far west of China that borders several Stan countries.
Yeah.
What's going on there? I recently learned this like last week.
So it's not a recent thing. It's been going on for a while. It's just some of the documents were leaked that, whether they do it on purpose, whether they do it for other reasons, and it turns out that most Western countries' suspicion was right. They're doing it because they want to convert them. They don't want their religions. They think that's the very reason that caused their terrorist attack. And people are very paranoid in China, and we want to make them speak Mandarin just like the rest of the country.
So pretty much making them assimilate to the culture.
Exactly. By force.
That's nuts. That's crazy though, because like, like when you speak of like first tier cities, right, it's like you do see a lot of these individuals, right, coming from the Middle East to like Guangdong or like Shenzhen, right, and they're there for just sole purpose is just to work, right? Now it makes me wonder, are those people also harassed because they're in tier one cities? Are they harassed also the same way?
That cannot comment. I do not know.
Yeah, that's just mind-boggling.
What I can tell you is I met these 6 Tibetan students.
Yeah.
Back in college. We went to this nearby bar. A lot of students were there, called On the Road. And I remember talking to them at that time. And they were telling me about their experiences, studying, working in a predominantly Han Chinese environment in Eastern China.
Yeah.
So they actually, surprisingly, I did not expect it. One of them told me he actually feels more freedom on Eastern China because it's predominantly Han, so there's less surveillance in that environment.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so he feels more free to speak up that how they're discriminated against. So what I understand is the surveillance and restrictions occurred more often in their own region because that's where the Liberation Army troops are. They actually send troops over there to monitor people, to scan their body before they go into a shopping mall. So in that region, they're actually more surveyed than Eastern China.
Okay.
Because they worry less in a predominantly Han environment.
Right.
They're more paranoid about things would erupt, especially following the Tibetan riots back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And there was another one in 2009, I think around March.
Didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
Was that the one with
there's
not
also-
Dalai Lama, right? Or is that the one?
It's the one a lot of Han Chinese were were slayed. People were set on fire.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
I think there's
in
also a story about the Dalai Lama, how he's potentially the last one.
Of.
He's the last Dalai Lama.
Oh.
Because supposedly the person that finds the Dalai Lama is the one that's right under him, and the next one that's supposed to be the seeker or the finder of the Dalai Lama apparently was taken, or he was captured by the Chinese government.
Damn.
Hmm.
What do you foresee happening with this whole situation? What do you think is? Do you think they'll be able? The Muslims will be. What are they called?
Uyghurs.
Uyghurs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they will have enough, speaking power to fight this thing? Like, it's gonna get more bloody than it's gonna.
So here's the thing, and it resonates with all social democratic movements in China, whether it's in Hong Kong, in Tibet, or any other minorities, or Taiwan. I think it comes down to one thing, is that these communities do need international help. And oftentimes, actually every time when they seek international help, China would say these countries are they're trying to interfere our internal affairs. And they always say that. Because there is a mentality called 自扫门前雪. So I sweep my own snow in front of my own front yard.
Right.
So
minding my own business.
Minding your own business. So it's very close-minded. So what I was trying to explain to my parents is that the world is actually one. There's a one integrity. What you do as a country could effectively affect people from other countries.
Right.
When Xi Jinping is building, One Belt, One Road policy, it actually has certain economic benefits or harm. We don't know. I don't want to over comment on that, but it has effects on other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Same with what you do within your country, because eventually it will have impacts on surrounding regions.
Right.
And people from China who have never been to Hong Kong, Tibet, or Xinjiang, they don't necessarily know the situation there. But like I said, we're so indulged, like growing up, we're so indulged in our own study and our personal welfare, because the country is growing literally from zero to a very wealthy nation.
Yeah.
So people were very concentrated on what they can achieve through doing business or studying abroad. So it becomes a very selfish process, increasingly. I would say that.
I don't even know when America would want to interfere, because
I mean,
China's a superpower right now. You think so?
I mean, China's always been a superpower, but in terms of interference, as of recently, they already did interfere, right? Especially with Hong Kong protests. Donald Trump, he did sign the Human Rights Act over there, and it's that's already him pretty much poking his nose into,
right.
the situation.
We also remembered the Democratic movement student leaders actually came to the U.S. and lobbied these politicians, both Democrats and Republicans.
They came
to the U.S. They came
I
to.
did not know that.
Yeah, they came to They went to White House. Went to New York to actually lobby these politicians to actively seek for help. We saw the Hong Kong singer Ho Wan-si, Dennis Ho, and she's a LGBTQ activist, and she's the one who spoke out during the Umbrella movement in 2014, and she was banned from going to China ever since then. Yep. She was popular. I remember back when I was in middle school.
Oh yeah, she was really popular back then.
Not anymore, because of that.
Yeah. Do you think World War III will happen? Because if you think about
World War III, let's not.
No, because realistically, this is exactly what Germany did with the Jews, right? But this is in a smaller province, and this is with Muslims. Kind of the same thing if they're cleansing and doing an ethnic cleanse.
Xinjiang is a large province.
Yeah.
Xinjiang is not a small region. Hong Kong is a small city compared to the vast China.
Yeah.
If you look at map, Xinjiang is big.
It's huge.
Where still the predominant population right now is Han. So when they talk about Uyghurs or East Turkestan, that's how they name it. It was actually a small region. but that movement resonates with other minorities in
Yeah.
Xinjiang. So they tend to say people from eastern China tend to generalize and lump them together, call them Xinjiangren. But the fact is, a lot of Xinjiangren are actually Han Chinese. So that's not like
That's kind of funny.
that's not even a
Dang. Okay,
politically
so
correct way to call them.
if not World War III, some kind of war, some
I mean,
kind of
there's
battle.
like right now, right? Like if you look at Hong Kong specifically, there's like it's pretty much like a revolution. It's an uprising, right? It's like the people are they're fighting for their rights. They're trying to get their voice out to the world, and the world is seeing, the world is noticing, right? It's no longer like a just a family feud. It's a world feud now, right? Because the whole world knows what's going on in Hong Kong. So if anything were to happen, it's gonna be known, right? If there's gonna be a revolution, if there's actually gonna be like armed conflict, it's gonna be very, very known. Like I mean, there's been like discharges of firearms already, but like at the same time, it's very minimal, right? Just because of the fact that the people on the ground, right? We can't tell how they feel. We can't feel their emotions, right? But those officers were probably scared for their lives as well. That discharged their firearms and potentially killed several people by accident. They probably didn't mean to. It's just like they were doing their job, and then they just kept getting swarmed.
Yeah.
Right? From that perspective, right? And then that's just adding more fuel to the fire that these locals are Hong Kongers are kind of like being like, what the hell are you doing? You know, it's like, this makes no sense. And it's raising that tension higher and higher. So it's gonna burst soon. You know.
And this is not the end of the protest.
No. It's been going on for how long, I think? It started like in
For over
April?
8 months now.
Was it around April
I was in
when it
Hong
started?
Kong in late March.
Yeah.
And it literally started after I left. I remember that. When I was in a hotel, I was watching TV. And that was when the extradition bill was introduced following that murder case in Taiwan. And I've already seen signs when I was there. Like people show up banners in Jingzazui. And I knew something would happen because people were talking about it. And once I left, and there was just millions of people, like 1/3 of the city flood to downtown and protesting that.
It's crazy.
No?
Still ongoing, yeah.
In the meantime, I'm as a mainlander myself, I'm very encouraged by their bravery. I would say is very inspirational. They're able to do something that we mainlanders feel are absolutely hopeless about, because we've already given up on that.
So shouldn't that like spark a eureka moment, would you say, for like the mainlanders? Because like it's like
it already did.
Yeah,
It did?
it's definitely in there. I feel like it's burning right now, but I don't think it's the right time for the main Chinese people to speak up.
Especially when the extradition bill was eventually suspended by Carrie Lam.
Yeah.
Some of the mainlanders actually start commenting on Weibo and their own social media platform and say, how come Hong Kongers can protest and have results? And if that can spark any results, how come we cannot do anything?
Dun dun.
That's a really good good
There you
question.
go.
So that's when I saw that comment, I was like, yep, right there. It starts happening now.
We will
Now it's
start
gonna be a
thinking-
domino effect.
Exactly. And
Oh my god.
And also, it's increasingly difficult. And remember that it's increasingly difficult for authorities to do anything lethal at this point. Back in the days when surveillance cameras were not quite there yet, when social media was not quite there yet, they can run over people with tanks.
They could do whatever they want.
Can you do it now?
You probably
Or
can, but
you
like,
still want to be more sophisticated way.
Oops,
Yeah.
didn't see him there.
Exactly. It's getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
Protesters are, the civilians are very smart too now. When you look at those protesters, the things that they destroy, they know how to be organized and coordinated in a lot of ways. They know the cameras are the one that needs to be destroyed. They know how to wear masks, to avoid facial recognition.
Lasers to burn the camera lenses.
Exactly, and to destroy the train ticket machine because they can record your information. So they pay by cash instead of credit card. So they pay attention to those details.
Yeah. When we were talking to Ivan in our episode with the Hong Kong protests, he's the photographer there. He said it was a leaderless movement because it just so happens that everyone is on the same page, that when they act on something, people already will support it because they know it's for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And
people aren't, they're not like, there's no second guessing.
Yeah.
Like, people will show up.
Yeah, there's also like subgroups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting and kind of like the dynamic of how kind of it transpired, right? Like he was actually talking about how the Hong Kong version of Reddit, right? On that they would post forums, and from those forums they would make certain subgroups where these people were drivers, or these people were the people that were going to find supplies.
Assigned roles.
Yeah, it was like assigned roles. When you're in each individual subgroup, this was your job. And then, like, once the meeting point was set, everyone would go, no matter what. Like, hands down, no one did not go.
Right.
That's just mind-boggling to me.
And I want to talk about, since this is an identity podcast,
Yeah.
I really want to like bring to light about the Hong Kong identity, even as a mainlander. What I perceive a very interesting trend to me is back in the days, before Hong Kong was returned to China, more people at that time felt that they're Chinese. Or let's say more people were self-identified as Chinese.
Like the people from Hong Kong?
From Hong Kong.
That's so interesting.
Than nowadays. Because under British rule, they know they were colonized.
Yeah.
So they want to stress their Chinese identity. So they have that resistance in their mind. But when it was actually handed over, and you saw this government, putting pressure on them, singing national anthem, forcing you to identify that you're Chinese, you have to acknowledge that. And people go the other way around. And no, we're actually different. We have our value, we have our gay bunfa, their basic law, and their freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
And their rights to vote.
Right.
And increasingly, if you look at data, the line just goes down. Like fewer and fewer people start feeling that they're actually Chinese.
Identifying as their Chinese.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by 2018, like by the current date, I think, if I remember correctly, only 20% of young generation of Hong Kong identify themselves as Chinese.
That's understandable though, because like from that perspective, they pretty much experienced freedom, liberty, right? And then knowing that it's going to be taken away, obviously they're going to fight for that, right? And
you also got to remember, like, these people are the ones that were born in our generation, right? Like, Hong Kong was handed back to China in
1997.
Yeah, 1997. It's been just over 20 years. So, like, a lot of the people that grew up during that time, they grew up in a, independent Hong Kong, right? Like, Hong Kong was a what do you call it? It was a city within China, but at the same time felt like its own country, right? Because of its own currency, its own economic power, and it's what I believe was two economies under one.
Two countries, one.
Yeah.
One country, two system.
Yeah, one country, two systems. It was under that act, right? And it's like they're very successful in it, so that's why people can identify that it's like self-sustaining. It's its own economy. It's got everything. It's its own country in a sense.
But subtext is that system won't change until 50 years later.
Yes. So in another like 30-ish or
47.
Yeah, 20%, right.
But because some things were trying to push for it faster, I feel like they wanted to, correct me if I'm wrong, that's why they spoke up earlier, right? Yeah.
Because they're afraid it's actually very responsible for them to think about their next generation, what they are going to go through, what their identity is going to be like.
Yeah.
I think it's very forward thinking, and it sparks a lots of debate in other Chinese speaking countries like Taiwan.
Yeah.
Their presidential election is going on. It will be done by next month. So obviously their Green Party, I think it's their Democratic version, and they will say we won't be like next Hong Kong. So one country, two system just doesn't work. It's just a way for people for the central government in Beijing to completely own you as a transition, right? And during this time, we also see like Macau, which was a previous colony under the Portuguese rule.
Yep.
They don't make any noises. They haven't made any noises.
I mean, they're doing their own thing.
Do they have any reason to? I mean,
not necessarily. I would say because Hong Kong was under British rule.
Yeah.
The
Just for that
English-speaking country, they're way more powerful. They're more prevalent. They're international financial hub.
Yep.
Macau was not even close to that. You can literally walk around an entire city and that's about it. That's how tiny it is. And it's entirely based on tourism, casino.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that they feel very strong to protest against.
I think in this time period too, they're just like in America where anyone can pretty much rally and speak up against anything pretty much, voice their opinions. You can start to see little fires globally too. People are starting to see like you said earlier, the same influence the Hong Kong protesters have on the mainland Chinese people. You see that everywhere else too. People are like, oh, if they can see results rallying together, if we could see positive change and make an impact like this, then we should do it. Like, why not? Like, I don't know how long ago this was, but when I was watching Anthony Bourdain, he was in Greece, they had their own uprising too. I didn't know about that. But yeah, everyone has a reason to speak up, and if you feel like you should be held accountable, then you should take responsibility. That's the same thing with Ivan when he decided to go back to Hong Kong because he felt the need to play his part as a Hong Konger, to be on the front lines.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other point is, Hong Kong is more complicated than we mainlanders think. We tend to think that's a Chinese territory that was seceded during the Opium War. But that was under Qing's government, remember? And China has since transformed. It went three times. It went through Qing Dynasty, which is the last ancient
Emperor.
era. Yeah.
The last emperor.
And then we had Republic period, which is Taiwan now. And then when communism took over in 1949, so the country that Hong Kong was handed back to, quotation marks, is not what it was originally.
It's not the Qing Dynasty no more, man.
It's not a Qing Dynasty. It was returned to People's Republic.
Yeah.
So if you can return to a People's Republic, I mean, think about it. The logical way of thinking is there's no reason why it cannot be returned to Taiwan.
Wait, it can be returned to Taiwan?
To Republic of China. Because Taiwan is...
Right. Yeah.
So if you want to hand it back to People's Republic of China, why they cannot be handed back to Republic of China?
Yeah.
Since they're both evolved government, Chinese government from Qing Dynasty. So that just speaks to the general mentality that the Communism Party, it wants to be recognized as the only Chinese government, controlling government.
I see.
Right. So that's one way when Taiwanese athletes, go to Olympic Games, they're always Chinese Taipei. They're not Taiwan or Republic China. And they still haven't got the rights to hold their flag at this point.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And it's interesting that there's a large percentage of Hong Kong citizens have dual citizenship. I would say over 50% or so, they have British citizenship.
Yep.
But back in, I need to double check that, but it was either in the 60s or 70s, the UK actually changed the law and somehow convert their passports to BNO passport. I don't remember the full name of it.
BNO.
It basically limits Hong Kong citizens' rights to migrate to the UK.
Oh, wow.
They have a sort of a Commonwealth passport, something like that, an Australian, it was under British, and then they can like go there to do certain things, but they're not allowed to live there. So Hong Kong citizens, like under the current pressure, they are sort of lobbying the British government to give their rights again, to give back their rights to move to the UK. Right. So there were a lot of Hong Kong citizens felt like pretty disappointed by both British government and Chinese government, because Chinese government doesn't really contribute. If you look at Hong Kong's economy, it's actually been stagnant over the last 20 years. And British just, I'll just give it back to you, to China. And native Hong Kongers felt kind of abandoned by British as well. So some of them would say, we were colonized. They acknowledge that history. We were colonized by Britain, but now we're colonized by People's Republic of China. So they always feel like they don't have that separate.
They don't have a home.
Exactly.
They don't have a self-identity because they're constantly under rule by another governing force.
Exactly. And now the younger generation cannot afford their housing. If they get a regular job, it's way too expensive. There's the most expensive housing market in the world.
In Hong Kong?
In Hong Kong. I was in March, I saw, I particularly paid attention to their housing prices because you see their advertisements everywhere. I even saw those old ladies were holding banners to lure people to buy houses in the other Bay Area as part of...
Bay Area?
So they call it Bay Area, but the Bay Area is mostly around, if you look at southern China, there's one area that has it's a triangle shaped. So we call it Bay Area. It's mostly in Guangdong province. So Hong Kong is part of it. Macau and some of the mainland city, Guangzhou is one of them. Dongguan, Foshan, like these surrounding cities, what we call that Bay areas. So these cities in mainland obviously have cheaper housing, although they're still increasingly expensive now. But they're encouraging Hong Kongers or people from Macau to like move to mainland and develop this Bay Area as an economic hub together. It's very interesting. So I was particularly paid attention. I went to one of the real estate agents and asked for housing prices. And if you're a Hong Kong citizen, Hong Kong permanent resident, obviously the prices are cheaper. But I remember I saw this very average looking high-rise apartment in Causeway Bay in Hong Kong Island. I'm telling you, it's a $1 million for one bedroom.
Oh my God.
That's to own?
To rent.
To rent.
Imagine that.
Well, that one is to own, but it's always over $1 million.
Oh my God.
I don't see anything that's under $1 million. Well, Hong Kong Island, Causeway Bay is it's a rich neighborhood. It's a good neighborhood.
But for $1 million, that's
for $1
nuts.
million. Kennedy Town is the same. Not to mention Central, Zhongwan. Right? They're all really, even apartments in Mongkok, which is more inland compared to other parts of Hong Kong, it's still insanely expensive. So people are being pushed further north, closer to mainland, where housings are cheaper.
So what would you say, like in Hong Kong, right? Because the housing market, right, to own a house, to even live in a house is so high. Would you say there's like also like a very large presence of like homeless people?
I can't comment on that. I don't have enough knowledge about it. What I do know is the reason why younger people are angry is part of it because their parents and their teachers were able to buy a place. They can buy property. Younger generation are no longer able to do that anymore.
You can only rent.
Exactly. Rent for the rest of your life. If you don't inherit anything from your parents, chances are you will rent. Or better options to move to Canada, move to Australia, where if you sell your tiny little one-bedroom apartment in Hong Kong, you can buy a big house. That's a whole level of life enhancement.
Oh my God, I never thought about that.
Life enhancement.
It's like completely picking up from
Exactly.
where you live and selling everything there to move to another country and live a
so people always
luxurious
assume
life.
you know when they talk about crazy rich Asian, a lot of times it's not they're rich, so they can afford a big house in Vancouver or anything. It's just because their hometown housing market is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So when you convert that,
Crazy fake rich.
Exactly, and it comes to
so
US,
you're a fake rich Asian.
it just becomes a lot easier
Yeah.
because life in North America overall it is comfortable for us.
It really is. Yeah. Okay, so unfortunately that's all the time that we have.
Okay.
But yeah, the world, like with that being said, you know, the world is ever changing.
Yeah.
You know, to all our listeners, definitely pay attention, educate yourself. There's a lot going on. You don't want to miss out. But before we end, would you, Dee, do you have any advice, life advice that you would like to leave our listeners?
I would say don't give up on your dream. If you want something badly, put your heart into it. And do as much as you can.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
And then once again, listeners, thank you for dining with us and joining us in this conversation. Don't forget to give us 5 stars, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We're also on Spotify and YouTube, and Instagram and Facebook. Hit us up on all those platforms.
And just so you are aware, ladies and gentlemen, this is our last episode of the season. So again, Dee, we just want to thank you for being our season closer.
Season finale.
I'm so
season
honored.
Finale. Yeah. But yeah. All right. So with that being said, Vince, when are we coming back?
We will be coming January 12th, I believe. So we'll be on a break for 3 weeks. But after this episode, we'll have a closer episode. So look out for that. Right.
Yep. We'll have a closer after this one. Let me get a little bit better first.
Yeah.
And then we'll go ahead and record that. But for the time being, we want to thank you for dining with us, and we will catch you on the next season. Take care, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.